about the Japanese strategy moving into 42. They clearly want to have predominance in all of the Pacific, and they want to put pressure on American supply lines coming out of Australia. This is one of those debatable ideas. Do they really want to invade Australia? Yes, no? Well, some historians say yes, some say no. It's still one of those debated topics. One of the most daring and early assaults, offensive assaults, that America attempted and successfully completed was Doolittles Raid. Remember from Lesson 7, Jimmy Doolittle, flying ace, and really probably one of the top pilots in World War II, flew air raids into Tokyo and other major cities on April 18, 1942. 16 B-25 Mitchells, 80 airmen, 52 officers, 28 enlisted men. These bombers took off the deck of the USS Hornet. They actually didn't know if they were going to make it. If you read in the chapter, I believe 4 or 5 in Donald Miller's Story of World War II, there's a first-hand account of a sailor on the Hornet that said everybody on the Hornet held their breath as these bombers took off. These strategic attacks really hit home because Japan was not ready for an assault, and the Japanese public had not felt any type of pressure from China or any other country it was at war with at the time. So these were the first assaults that were successful, and assaults that actually not only hit strategic targets but also killed civilians as well. This forces Yamamoto to launch ribbon defense to protect the main islands and to launch attacks on major islands like Midway. I want to talk a little bit about, when we get to Joseph Rochefort, this is going to be tremendously important for American naval intelligence, this particular raid, because it creates such disruption that naval intelligence is going to be able to pick these movements up, and that this is going to help break the Japanese code. So Doolittle's raids destroyed supply, provided an important and much needed boost for American morale in the Pacific, and it also helped naval strategists moving toward Midway. Midway is a few months away from these raids. So here we have Jimmy Doolittle on the left, Captain Mark Mitcher on the right, and these are the guys. This is the crew that flew the mission, and that's the Mitchell bomber taking off the deck of the USS Hornet. Let's take a look at this is a very important battle, the Battle of Coral Sea. Keep in mind, naval warfare is shifting. Do you remember us talking about the Japanese invasion of Singapore, the Japanese invasion of Hong Kong? Well, following those invasions, the British battleships have been sunk, and America knows under Chester Nimitz and Bull Halsey that they're going to have to readjust. And that readjustment is they're going to have to focus less on battleship warfare and more on carrier-based warfare. So this particular battle becomes one of the first major carrier battles and sort of a strategic turning point, because technically the battle is a draw, but it's a strategic victory for the United States. And really the battle changes naval warfare. The Japanese are looking to invade Port Moresby on the southern tip of Papua New Guinea. This would give them a couple of strategic advantages. If they wanted to launch an assault on Australia, they could. And if they wanted to shut down the supply lanes between Australia and Hawaii, they would be able to do that. We know without question that was one of their key strategies. The U.S. Carrier Task Force engaged them in a battle. Again, technically a draw. We did lose the USS Lexington in this particular battle. That was a pretty devastating loss. Again, the first major battle between aircraft carriers. The carrier-based planes inflicted most of the damage. Again, American planes are sorely outmatched by the Japanese Zeros in this particular battle. The battle, again, as I said, ends in a draw, but really America gains a significant victory here because they stopped the Japanese from gaining Moresby, they stopped the Japanese from gaining Papua New Guinea, and they keep their supply lanes open from Australia. Another important thing is what military group, our U.S. military group, are currently mobilizing out of Australia? Anybody remember? Who was evacuated to Australia? MacArthur, very good. So the U.S. Army in the Pacific is starting to mobilize in Australia under MacArthur. So what we have here is a map of the Battle of Coral Sea. And you can see the strategic importance of Port Moresby in relation to Australia. Another important thing here is that these are the shipping lanes, right? So America wants to maintain, especially in the Coral Sea, wants to maintain control of these shipping lanes. And what we're going to be getting into, not in 9, I think 10 or 11, we're going to be talking about all this island hopping that goes on here, because we're going to stop in the summer of 42. We'll continue after the Battle of Midway. Here's a picture of the Battle of Coral Sea, the air battle. And then this is the Douglas dive bomber. That was the most successful American aircraft in this particular battle. The Nakajima bomber was used in this battle, but the Zero inflicted the most damage for the Japanese in this particular battle. And then what I've got for you here just shows you, again, the shipping lanes from Hawaii to Australia, not only supply but also soldiers, and then the importance of preventing the Japanese from controlling these areas. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's what makes Guadalcanal a really important strategic location as a position of defense, but also as an airfield, because Guadalcanal, as far as like geography is concerned, was a dense jungle that was just filled with insects, snakes, and scorpions. So there wasn't like a lot of strategic value for its geography and supply. It was more strategic for defense and the Henderson Airfield that we're going to learn about a bit later. So we'll just have a breakdown of the ships involved in the battle and the losses. So we've got obviously the loss of the Lexington was significant. We lost the Yorktown in this particular, the Yorktown was damaged. We'll later lose the Yorktown. But the next battle that we're going to get into is going to be far more important for us, and really this is going to be the turning point of the war in the Pacific. This, without question, will be on the midterm exam. So you're going to want to take note of this. And that is the Battle of Midway. It's fought from June 3rd to 6th, 1942. And we can thank this gentleman right here for not making it happen, but really turning the tide of this battle. This is Joseph Rochefort. He is a naval officer that worked really underground in Hawaii. He worked in a red smoking jacket and slippers as he tried to break the Japanese code purple. He broke the code because the Japanese used initials for the codes of different islands. So Rochefort's men sent out a signal that Midway was low on water. The Japanese resend the signal back, AF, low on water. That's when the code was broken. Rochefort lets Nimitz know, and Nimitz is basically, Nimitz and Halsey are going to attempt to set a bit of a trap that actually works in their favor. So they know the Japanese are moving on Midway. Why is Midway so strategically important? It is. It's in the middle. But its proximity to Hawaii would allow the Japanese to be able to do what? Attack, but in what way? They could potentially launch a ground attack from Midway. It wouldn't just be a carrier attack. So Midway is extremely important. Another thing too that we got to consider is the importance of Midway as a fueling station. Another thing that we have to consider is the importance of Midway as a defensive base. So losing Midway would be pretty devastating for the United States. So this is where the Japanese are going to strike after Coral Sea. And again, this fellow right here, Joseph Rochefort, he is going to be the naval intelligence officer responsible for breaking Code Purple. Here we have Midway Island on the left, Midway Atoll. We have an image of Midway under attack on the right. This gives you an idea of how important this island is to hold to prevent an assault on Hawaii and Pearl Harbor yet again. So again, at Midway, the most important ships were aircraft carriers. The planes in this particular battle decided the victory. The United States had 3 carriers while the Japanese had 4. U.S. Air Base at Midway also had numerous fighters and bombers, but those had minimum impact on the battle. I should mention, though, an important group that had an impact in this battle were the coastal artillery at Midway. Here we have the USS Yorktown prior to the war with planes on the deck. It had been damaged in Coral Sea. The Yorktown was hit by Japanese carrier planes. It was the only carrier lost at Midway. The Japanese lost 4 carriers and many of their pilots. The loss of the Japanese carrier pilots, some of their most experienced pilots, and the loss of these carriers turned the tide of the war. The United States will be able to go on and continue to produce these ships and continue to produce any ship they want. The Japanese are not going to have the ability to produce any more carriers. That's why this battle is so important. So we saw a sketch of what a Douglas looked like. This is a Douglas in action at Midway. It's one of the Douglas dive bombers. There's another important thing to talk about in terms of Midway, and that is the Japanese had the ability to retreat. They They had the ability to move out, but they rolled the dice, and as their planes returned to deck, they refueled and were loading them with bombs to attack again. And that's when the United States was able to strike them and take out the most of the planes and take out the carriers. So that right there is going to be devastating and really a big part of this turning point. Here we have the F-4 Wildcat fighter, U.S. plane, and then we have the Douglas here on the bottom right. It played a major role in both Coral Sea and Midway. Here we have a sketch of the assaults on the Japanese carrier. And then really what we look at here is the fact that the United States was able to take out some of the most skilled pilots that Japan had, and was able to take out 4 of their carriers. Those carriers lost, reduced the threat to Australia, and really neutralized the Japanese Navy moving forward. You guys have any questions? All right, awesome.